right. Well, hello, everyone. It's 7 p.m. It is October 14th, 2020, and you are watching the prayer stream. I'm Pastor TJ. I hope that you are having a good week so far. Mine is just trucking along at this point, and I want to spend a little bit of time this evening continuing, as we have been the past few weeks, looking at the Gospel according to John. Chapter 4, one of my favorite stories is here in John chapter 4. It's the woman at the well, or the Samaritan woman, however you might have heard it called before. But this is a very important story here. And I know that I've talked about it before. Maybe some of you could probably teach some of the stuff from this story, but every time I look at it, something new comes out. And so earlier this week, yesterday, I was there at Parkview with the 9th and 10th graders, and we were going over this chapter together, looking at some of their questions, some of their comments about it, and we had a fun time just dialoguing and looking at these things. And we talked about some of the context there, how the Jews and the Samaritans were enemies, and this was going back generations, and they were both Jews. Really, it was just two sects. The way that I described it with the students this week was sort of like, you have Protestants and you have Catholics, but they're both Christians, right? They fall under the same umbrella of Christian. There are some differences, a lot of similarities, but some differences. Or it's like, maybe looking at Republicans and Democrats, but they're both Americans, right? Some similarities, but a lot of differences as well. So that's sort of what you have with the Jews and the Samaritans in Jesus' day. They were two separate teams, and that's how they viewed it. And the Jews, they looked at the Samaritans really like animals to a point. They viewed them as unclean in a similar way as they viewed Gentiles. And there were actually religious laws in place that said that if you were walking down the street and you happened to walk past a Samaritan and their shadow fell upon you, a Jew, you would be unclean until the morning. So, this context is very important when you're looking at Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan. But also, it's important here. So, how things would go is that if Jews had to travel, if they were going from Judea to Galilee, Samaritan was in the middle. And instead of going straight, making that the shortest trip as the crow flies, Jews would typically go all the way around Samaria. So they would add hours to their journey just so they wouldn't have to walk through that unclean town with those unclean people. It was that bad. And so some of the stuff that is said in this chapter, if you have that context in mind, the story jumps out at you. Once again, Jesus, he's constantly in this process of breaking down barriers, these man-made laws that separate people from each other and from God. Jesus was just like, I'm not about that. And it starts here in verse 4, John chapter 4 and verse 4, talking about, Jesus and the disciples, they left Judea, they were going to Galilee. But instead of going around like the Jews would typically do, verse 4 says, but he needed to go through Samaria. So Jesus had a purpose in going through Samaria. And so he goes into the city, and he's near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. And Jacob's well is there. This well-known well-respected place. You can read about it in the Old Testament. And Jesus, he's been traveling. He's tired. He needs a little bit of a break. And verse 6, another little hint that John drops. It's easy for us maybe to breeze past it, but this is important here because it gives us more context about what we're going to see with this woman. But at the end of verse 6, it says, it was about the 6th hour. So it's late in the day. The sun is straight up. It's hot. That's not when the women went to the well to get water. Historically speaking, the women would go to the well in the morning time when the dew was still on the ground and the sun wasn't up because it was cooler. And this was sort of the hangout for the ladies. I'd imagine it was probably a gossip mill as well. But this is where the ladies would come together, they'd get their water, and they'd hang out. And so Jesus is coming, though, at the 6th hour, when the ladies have already come and gone. The women aren't there at the well gathering their water, but verse 7 says, a woman of Samaria came to draw water. So this Samaritan woman is coming late in the day. Why isn't she going earlier in the day? Something's up here, right? There's something, it'll come up later in the story, but something is keeping her from wanting to be around the other women. She doesn't want to be around them. Maybe she's not welcome around them. Because as we're about to find out, this woman has a past. But she comes to the 6th hour, Jesus is there, and he says to her, give me a drink. Give me a drink. His disciples, they'd gone into the city to buy food. And then the woman of Samaria, verse 9, said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? So once again, we're starting to get multiple layers here. We've already talked about the context between Jews and Samaritans. They don't talk to each other. They don't hang out. The Jews really look down pretty harshly upon Samaritans. She's like, you're a Jew and you're asking me for a drink? What is this? This isn't normal. This doesn't typically happen. And John points that out in verse 9 once again, for Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. But she says, me, a Samaritan woman. Once again, some context, culturally speaking, Jewish men did not speak to women out in public if that woman was not their wife or their daughter, someone they were closely related to. It was sort of a respect thing. So Jesus is breaking multiple barriers here, right? He's a Jew and he's talking to a Samaritan. He's a man and he's talking to a woman. Out of this well, this public place where everybody can see. It's the 6th hour, right? It's not late. It's not late at night. It's not early in the morning. It's the middle of the day. And Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. The woman said to him, sir, you have nothing to draw with and the well is deep. Where will you get that living water? And he goes on to say, whoever drinks of this water will never thirst again. It's going to spring up like a fountain of water into everlasting life from the person who drinks it. And then verse 15, the woman said to him, sir, give me this water that I might not thirst, nor come here to draw. So, this is very, very similar to what we looked at last week in chapter 3. Right? Jesus is talking with Nicodemus. And Jesus is comparing and contrasting spiritual things and literal things, physical things. He's talking spiritually. Nicodemus is only thinking literally, and he's not getting the picture, and Jesus has to explain. Once again, Jesus here, he's talking about this living water as opposed to just plain old water. The living water's spiritual, the plain old water's literal. Jesus is talking spiritual, the woman is only thinking literal. Right? She's confused here. And then, verse 16. instead of Jesus explaining things more, he gets really personal. And it seems like this comes out of nowhere, right? He's asking for water, then he's talking about spiritual things. She asks him a question, and then he changes the tone, and he says, go call your husband and come here. Why is Jesus getting so personal here? Is there a reason? Yes, there is a reason. And we were already told that reason, remember? Verse 4. But he needed to go through Samaria. Jesus, he knows he's going to meet this woman. And he knows this woman on a deep level, right? He's about to spout off all this history that he couldn't possibly know if he was just some regular dude. But the Spirit is leading to him. The Spirit is guiding him. The Spirit is showing him things. And he knows this woman. He knows her heart. And he knows the pain and rejection that she's experienced in her life, right? And so he asks this question, and she answers, I have no husband. And Jesus said to her, you've said, well, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband. So she's been married and divorced 5 times. Now she's living with a man who's not even willing to marry her. Now we know why she's coming to the well at the 6th hour. In the Jewish culture, and like I said, Samaritans and Jews, they're under that Jewish umbrella. Some differences there, but a lot of similarities. And in the Jewish culture, the Hebrew culture, divorced women, they're ostracized. They were looked down upon. They were judged very harshly. And this woman hasn't been divorced once or twice or 3 times, 5 times. And now she's living with the man. And odds are each time that she got divorced, and once again, we got to remember the way that things rolled back then. It was very easy for a man to divorce his wife for any little reason, any little thing. And he could get off scot-free, and the woman was left to fend for herself. And if she didn't have some male family in her life, some blood relatives, she's got no hope. Unless some other man will take her in. But she's got no bargaining chip, right? She's sort of forced to accept whatever comes her way. So odds are each successive husband is probably worse than the last. Because the quote-unquote good guys aren't going to take her. They're not going to mess with this broken woman, this used-up woman. This woman's caught between a rock and a hard place. She's experienced pain. She's experienced separation. And here is this man now who knows all this stuff. And she says, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship. So this was another area of headbutting for the Jews and the Samaritans. The Jews believed, nope, the only place to worship, the true place to worship, the true place to offer sacrifice, get forgiveness from God, it's only in Jerusalem. It's at the temple there. They believed that salvation came through them. And Jesus, he repeats this common mindset in the day. Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. Right? I mean, this sounds pretty harsh. Jesus, what are you talking about? Didn't you come to break these barriers down? Yes, he did. And he makes that clear in the next verse. Once again, he's parroting the things that everybody else was saying and thinking and what she would have known and experienced and heard herself. But then he says, so salvation is of the Jews, but the hour is coming, and now is when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship him. At this point, the Jews were very much worshiping God was about the day in which you worship, whether it was a Sabbath, whether it was one of these holy days, the place in which you worshiped, it was very territorial. It's got to be in Jerusalem. It's got to be at the temple. It's got to be at these set times. What you bring to offer to the sacrifice, all these regiments, all these barriers, all these things that had to be done. And Jesus is like, a time is coming. Actually, wait, it's here right now. It's embodied in me. God's looking for your heart. God knows your heart, woman at the well. And then she says, I know that Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. And then this bombshell in verse 26, Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. So this is the first time in Jesus' ministry that he has revealed who he is to somebody. He didn't even do that with the disciples, right? It's just like, come follow me. They think he's a prophet. They think he's a teacher. They don't realize he's the Messiah at this point. The first person he tells is a woman. A Samaritan woman. A Samaritan woman with a shady background. Now, I mean, Jesus is just all about breaking barriers here. And he's not just talking it, he's living it. He's showing it. And then so the disciples come back and they marvel that he would dare talk with a woman. The woman then left her water pot. I mean, she came there for water, right? That's why she's coming to the well, the 6th hour in the day. She forgot all about that. She's met Jesus, and her focus is on Jesus. She leaves the water pot. She goes back into the city and says, come see a man who told me all things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ? So here we see the first example in the New Testament of a gospel evangelist. An evangelist. And it's a woman. And it's a Samaritan woman. And it's a Samaritan woman with a shady background. I just, it's just me, but I don't buy that argument about women in ministry that, they can't be pastors, they can't be evangelists, they can't, like, what? Look at this. Look at this. And if you want to take it one step further, look at after Jesus was crucified, he was put into the grave, and then he resurrected. Who was the first one there at the gravesite? It was the women. Who was the first one to preach about the resurrection? It was the women. And so anyways, these people come, they accept Jesus, and these seeds are laid. He's going to come back later in his ministry. He's going to come back to Samaria, and people are going to be really ripe because this woman stays behind and she's preaching. She's evangelizing. So, I know we've read this story before. We've heard it maybe 100 times. But there's so much here, and that's what I'm trying to tell these kids every week, every Tuesday when we get together. And it's why when I give them the homework to read the chapter, I ask them to read it 3 times. Because I'm trying to train them in the way that we all should train ourselves when we come to the Bible. And that's to be looking right below the surface. Do the surface reading, but then dig deeper. Look a little further down. Because there's hidden gems. And knowing the history, knowing the concept can really make these stories come to life, right? If you don't know the concept or the context of Jews and Samaritans not liking each other, you're going to miss out on some of this stuff. If you don't understand the reason why John needed to point out that it's the 6th hour and this one woman is coming there, when all the other women come in the morning, you're going to miss out on that. If you don't understand the history, the culture of Jews and men and women in public and talking to each other, right? All this stuff, it comes out and it's right below the surface. You can learn a lot of this stuff. You can go to school, you can study theology. But we also live in an age where, like, Google is your friend. And if you have questions, if you're reading a chapter in the Bible, just, do a Google search. Look into it a little bit. But I highly recommend the IVP, Bible Background Commentary. They have it for the Old Testament and the New Testament, but especially the New Testament one, especially like looking through the Gospels. There's some powerful, powerful stuff in there. Also, any history stuff, any contextual history stuff in connection with first century Judaism put out by N.T. Wright. Can't go wrong with that. Can't go wrong with that. But yeah, these stories, I mean, there's powerful stuff. And the more you read this, the more you understand it, the more you realize why the Pharisees were so angry with Jesus. Because he's breaking all these man-made rules. They're trying to create an exclusive club, an exclusive club. And he's trying to create an inclusive family. They're trying to get rich on God's message. And Jesus is out here trying to give it out for free to anyone. But anyways, just wanted to share that with you. We'll see what next week brings, but be prepared. We might just be looking at some stuff in John chapter 5. Because I can't help it. I get with these kids on Tuesday, and they bring out some really, really cool stuff. They have a unique way of looking at things, and I get excited about it. And come Wednesday, I'm still excited about it. So I want to share it with you guys. You can't be in the classroom there with me every week, but I can at least bring some of the goodness that I get out of there and share it with you all. So Jesus and the Samaritan woman. It's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story. And I mean, her life was changed. All she knew was being mistreated by men. And then this man comes, knows her whole life story, and doesn't judge her for it. And instead extends an invitation to receive living water. Wow. It's a beautiful image of the gospel. All right. Well, let's move into prayer time. I don't see any prayer requests on the Google Voice account. But if you have anything, if you're watching this live on YouTube, you can go ahead and put something there in the chat box. And Mom and Dad, I will continue praying for you guys with your house, trying to get it sold. God's been working all along the way. It's pretty cool to see, just what's been happening over the past few weeks, really. Because I know that could have been a much more stressful endeavor. It's not over yet, but, it's been a lot easier than it could have been. So we'll continue praying that is the experience until the closing. But any other praises or prayer requests, if you're watching live, you want to just throw those into the chat box. We can pray about them. If you want to be praying for me this week as I prepare the sermon and preach the sermon this coming Sabbath. It's a tough subject, but I think an important one. For those of you that might not know, October is Domestic Abuse Awareness Month. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that from a biblical perspective. Like I said, it's not a fun topic, but I believe it's an important one, and for those that have experienced some of these things, I hope it can bring some comfort and healing and hope through Jesus. All right, well, let's move into prayer. Dawn and Sue, I see you guys there in the chat box. Good to have you ladies here with us this evening. Mom and Dad, I know y'all are watching too. Got your text. Somebody else is watching, because I can see the concurrent viewer number. Someone else is out there that hasn't said hey, but I don't know who you are unless you do. But whoever you are, glad that you are with us as well. All right, well, let us move into our prayer time. Our loving, gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for your many blessings. We thank you for your word and the time that we can spend in it. Lord, every time we open those pages, every time we open that app, however we're taking your word in, Lord, there's always something new, always something fresh for us to pick up on, and we're grateful for that. And we just ask that as we continue to study, continue to grow, that you would just continue to speak to our hearts, and that you would change us from the inside out, that you would fill us with your Spirit and give us the mind and character of Christ, that we would truly not only believe that he is our example, but live as if he was, and that we're trying to follow in his footsteps. Lord, I just ask that you continue to be with Mom and Dad as they're going through the sale of their house, getting ready for retirement. I pray that things continue to run smoothly, and that things go well. You've been working behind the scenes already, and we believe that you will continue to do so. And Lord, just continue praying for the world, this country, as we are still in the midst of this pandemic. Still a lot of uncertainty for the future, Lord, but we believe that you are in control. You know the end from the beginning. You're not surprised by anything, and so may we find comfort in that. May we place our trust and our dependence upon the sure foundation of Jesus. So, Lord, as we wrap up here this evening, we just give ourselves to you. We thank you for being here with us, and I pray that you just keep us all safe, and you bring us together this Sabbath, whether it's physically there in the church building or spiritually via technology. May our hearts and minds be open for whatever it is that you have planned for us this Sabbath, and we ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, everyone. Good to spend some time with y'all, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. And I will see you, like I said, whether in person or via YouTube or Facebook this Sabbath morning. Bye, guys.